Hello and welcome back to our Porsche restoration series. I had to put together a video on this front pan replacement and what's involved, some of the things you might run into. My friend Mike and I got this out of here a couple weeks ago. A lot of tooling to get it out, a lot of drill bits. Went through half a dozen drill bits. Used a Sawzall, used a jigsaw, used cutting wheels. A lot of tooling to get this out of here. Pry bars, hammers, pliers, anything you can think of to get you through these tough areas in here. There's going to be a lot of hidden welds that you're going to have to cut away some of the sheet metal to get to, and just pull and bend and twist and get it out of there. But once you get started, you'll kind of see what needs to happen. It's really it's more of a wrestling match rather than something that's difficult to do. Just get a bunch of tooling and throw at it, and eventually you'll get there. See the outside here, we've drilled out the outer edge. This is the easiest way to break it away from the outside. Do the best job you can. Cut some of these welds. Some of these are like arc welded on the edge, and most of them are spot welded. Spot welds aren't too bad. They are hard. You're going to go through a lot of bits. Tried some cutting oils, some cutting wax, and tried to dry. And I found that the best way to drill these things is dry, even though it's not good on your drill bit. It seems to get better traction and get the job done quicker. Cutting oil didn't seem to be any advantage for drilling those spot welds. Okay, so what we've done now, we've got our new pan mocked up in here. We've cut the other one out. We've tuned up the spot welds with a grinder and cleaned it all up. Cleaned up some of these areas that were eaten up with the acid. This front pan area and all the damage that you're seeing here. This is a battery thing. These early cars, even pre 911, 912s, a lot of battery acid problems in the front cross member area. So what would happen is you'd have a breach right here where the battery sits. This is got our first layer on. You don't see our second layer, but it would get down in this cavity. It would burn a hole in there, start dripping in there, and then it would condensate this trough and just wipe it out, just tear it apart from the inside out all the way across. So even if you have a good rust-free car, it doesn't necessarily mean you're good to go in this area. Really want to look your car over close. If you have any kind of breach with acid burning through in your battery area, you might want to replace this anyways. Okay, so what we're doing on the inside, we're marking it off here. You can see I've got a scribe mark as to where to cut for length. Got a clamp down, and that scribe mark is right on that edge. I'm using a utility knife with a nice sharp blade to scribe this. So basically, just setting it in there and tracing it down. That's going to get me my exact cut. You really want to be tight on this. I wouldn't cut it too loose. I'd cut it tight if anything, and then you can always take a little grinder and buzz the bit off if it doesn't fit in there. Look at the outside here. You can see here we're overlapped. So guessing the length on that's not really going to work. You're going to have to cinch it down a little bit and then cut off any excess. You can see we're running long. And these all run long depending on how much damage you got. You don't have to run the whole length of this piece. So I'm just going with what I need, bare minimum, to get this to work out. Leave as much original sheet metal in there as I can. You can see here it doesn't quite fit. That's some more adjusting to do, but this is going to fit a lot better once I get that bulk cut off of there, and then we can fine tune it from there. Also, you're going to want to keep your front control arms, front cross member intact while you get through this stage. So if you're doing a full restoration and you're going to go through all these bushings, keep the original ones together if you can. This will help you locate where this pan has to go. You want to bolt it down here first, and then get your pan floating in here. You don't really want it binding on anything, not pressing hard on anything, just kind of floating in there nutted down, and then that will be the exact location that you should end up. Once you get that all done, you get through that, I have to take this back off, cut this pan, bolt it back in there, and do any more adjusting I got to do to make it fit nice. Once I get there, then we can tack it. Okay, so let me cut those pieces, and be right back. Okay, got those rough cut and fitted back in there. Seemed to turn out nice and tight, except you can see right up here in the corner here, it's not quite going in. I'm just going to buzz that with a grinder and get it in there. Okay, so we're bolted down here. We're on our locking points, which will help carry the weight of this cross member while you're working with it. And as we come up front here, you can see in a real relaxed position, all our holes are going to line up nice. Check top and bottom, make sure everything's going to work out. I'll nut this down as soon as I tune up these last little spots that won't fit. But basically just clamp it together. Take a look at it from the inside. Yeah, you can see we got a nice tight cut there. That's going to weld up real nice. Put a nice seam weld on there. And then this down here, this will draw up, but probably need to sheet metal screw that into position. Okay, let me do one last fit and then we'll tighten her down. Okay, got that put back. Everything seems to fit really well. It's clamped in there. Also, I got the cross member control arms bolted back in. See, our butt joints look nice and tight. Nice and tight up in there. And same thing with the bottom. Shouldn't be any problem welding that back in. The front area still is basically floating. It's not really binding or rubbing against anything, and I'll be able to bend, roll, and clamp all this loose area after we tack it. Get this fitted much better. And then once that's welded in there, we'll do a complete weld, and then we may have to reinforce some areas depending on how that draws up. Maybe some extra bracket or something in here, and also on this edge. And then after all that's welded in and we like everything, then we're going to go ahead and put our second layer for our battery and tank support. Okay, so from here we're going to do all our final sandblasting. I'm going to replace this pedal assembly area where it bolts onto the bottom of the car, drilled off the old plate, and we're going to sandblast this, and then we're going to put a new bracket on there, weld it on nice and tight, and that should be good support for our pedals. And then I found a little bit of rust area right here. You see where I've traced out. This is the area I'm going to cut out. And this will actually be helpful when I sandblast the inside of the tunnel. It'll help clean it out and gain access to areas I wouldn't be able to get to, since I have to cut something out anyways. Better to cut a little large and benefit from it. You can see my marks here. What we're doing is we're cutting as close to a rolled edge or a seam as we can get it. This is going to be for a stronger patch rather than cutting in the middle of a flat area. It's always best to take it as far out to a bent edge for strength. And then I've got one more patch up here. I'll cut this guy out. Also, I'm going to show you a real neat trick to make a pattern for these patches. First we cut them out and then make a pattern and then fit a new piece in there. I'll show you how to do that. And then on the passenger side, or I'm sorry, the driver's side, in the rear passenger seat, there's a seat belt bracket. So I've got a little bit of rust on this one I found once we scraped all the undercoating out, so I've got a new replacement piece for this. I'll cut this up and catch this up with everything else going on. And we just finish up all our welding, all our patching, fix any dents I don't like on here, get everything finally sandblasted and rust treated. Then we can move on to funner things like undercoating and paint. Okay, let's get on with some sandblasting and we'll be back. Okay, we're all set up this morning. It's going to be the last of the sandblasting. See some of these areas I've got taped off and blocked off. What I'm trying to do is just keep it out of the cavities and these void areas that could fill up with sand while I'm trying to treat some of the easier areas. Block off our dashboard. I want to get up behind and shoot the back side of the dashboard and really try and spend some time in this tunnel. Pretty grungy in there. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how this turns out. You see I've got part of the floor cut out there, which will help move the sand through. I think it's actually going to be a plus for us. And also blocking off some areas that take in a lot of sand. While I'm doing this, just keep it out of there. Should go a little bit smoother and help with recovery. And my strategy is working from the bottom up. That way I can see right away what I'm blasting before it starts filling up with sand, and then work from the bottom upwards, and it should get easier as I go working towards the top. These rear fenders here are already rust treated up in the crevices, way up in there. Shot some rust converter in there. Did that yesterday, so now we can blast anything that the sandblasting doesn't get. That rust converter should handle nicely for us. And probably what I'm going to do with these fenders, this is kind of a difficult area to deal with. When I'm shooting the nozzle, shooting it straight up to the fender will actually help the blast direct towards the ground, which will be much easier for pickup and recovery, and I won't have it shooting in the air and going all around. So there it is. You kick that dolly out of there, get this thing rolled over, and let's get on with it. Okay, let's get some sand going, see what she looks like. Okay, taking a break here. It's about halfway through. Up to this point, about 4 hours of blasting. You can see it's starting to come along. Looking real good in these open areas. Some of the tighter areas are a little bit more time consuming. They fill up with sand and you can't see anything in there. You can see the sand just kind of settles in. You have to blow it out of the way in order to get in there and get what you need done. This area is starting to look pretty good. In contrast to our old rusty pan. Also with this front pan remover, we're able to get in here and clean out this area much easier. Take a look at our smuggler's box. I got quite a ways to go in here. I think I'm going to have to roll the car over and get it in the sunlight going on it. Real difficult to see. And then our interior. I actually thought working from the bottom up would be a good idea, but it turns out not a good idea. It's really advantageous to work from the top down. There isn't anything you can do on the bottom that's going to help. As you can see, the sand just fills everything up, and it looks like this like after 5 minutes. We're getting there. Starting to make some progress. And in our tunnel, clean it up a little bit better. I'm going to roll this over and get in the sunlight. It'll be a little easier to see what's going on. Okay, back to put the gear on. Sweat a little bit more. Well, that's finally over with. What a job. Oh my gosh. About 11 hours total blasting time to do this car from here. And actually, we had quite a bit of early sandblasting the engine compartment areas in some of the earlier videos you saw before we started body work. So total time to do this, it's got to be 20 hours so far, just in the body. But it turned out really nice. I'm real happy with it. It's going to give us a good base to put our undercoating on. And real tough up in here to do this, fender areas. But it turned out really nice. Our tunnel turned out real good too. Cutting this area out actually was real beneficial to getting up inside there, getting the lid of it, up the top section. Also, you can access our smuggler's box from this side. Good access here. And on that tunnel, I was able to stick the hose in the back end in some of those holes and get all kinds of angles and shoot down there and really clean it out. I thought it was going to be next to impossible, but it actually cleaned up real nice. By the time I get that sand out of there, I think we're going to be looking pretty good. See, it's all filling up in there. But no problem getting at it. All up under the dashboard. Covered in sand. Okay, so I'm going to clean this mess up, roll this guy out of the way, and then while I've got this mess out here, I'm going to do some of the bulky parts outside rather than the sandblasting tank. They won't fit in there, so I'm just going to take advantage of this mess right now, knock those out, and then that should be it for the big sandblasting. We can move on to better things, funner things, easier things. This is really a turning point. This is basically peak of the hill, and from here on, pretty much all downhill. This is the last of the hard work, hard, messy work. Okay, let me get on with this, and then we'll get back to the pan. Okay, we got everything cleaned up. We got our pan back in place here. What I've done is I've clamped it in and bolted in our cross member and control arms. A couple things we want to check for on this to make sure everything is straight and parallel with each other. First point we want to check is our rear cross member. This is going to be the most secure straight thing on the car or on the body. And what we want to do then is we want to take a straight edge or something. Let's grab the straight edge here. And we want to check up and down here as we sight across our straight edge that our cross member is parallel with that. If your car has been in an accident or has maybe been bent or twisted a little bit, you may have to straighten out the front area, because if these control arms are not parallel with each other, can end up with some steering problems or some ride problems. That's just a couple things you should check for. Let's go inside here and take a look at how we've cinched this down. So for now, I'm just doing the lower pan, and we want to get that in there, welded in there nice and tight. I've got my sheet metal screws in there, and I'm just going to rotate those along, and they're going to act like clamps as I do my spot welding as we go along. Everything's nice and clean now. I stripped all the primer coating off of this pan so that we could have welding wherever we want to put it, not have to worry about paint or primer. And I'm still going to make a couple brackets, I think, up in here and down here to straighten that up a little bit. So it's ready for welding. I'm going to go ahead and call this part 1 of the pan segment. Part 2, we're going to work on the top section, the battery tray and the tank support. That's quite involved, and we have to take the gas tank in and out and do some fitting there before we tack that. So we'll go over all the things involved with that. In the meantime, I'll get this welded off. A couple other quick things I'll show you before we wrap this video up. I'm doing some patching here. There's a patch here and a nice little patch over here. That's where that thing was lanced with something. show you a neat little trick how to make a perfect patch. Hopefully take some of the work out of these guys, because they can be a pain in the neck sometimes. And I like my patches, especially on some of this older work where you're taking new metal and blending it with old work. I try to get it as tight as possible, because some of the older sheet metal may have a little bit of pitting and might be a little bit thin in areas. So when you start tacking it, if you have too much of a gap in there, you could burn it away as you're trying to weld it. So I like to be a little bit tight. If you got a little gap in there is okay, but I found better success the tighter it is, the better. And then I just put a little chamfer on that edge so the weld can get down in there. So let me grab some tape and I'll show you how I do that. So what I'm doing is stretching some masking tape over the cutout area. So we're trying to replicate the shape of the car. And then I take a real sharp one-sided razor blade or utility knife and just cut down in there. Get down in there and just cut that guy out over here to the bench. And then I take that pattern, I stick it down onto my sheet metal that I'm going to be cutting. This is 18 gauge, pretty much what you want to be using here. And then I take a Dremel tool with some metal cutoff bits, and these work really good. It zips right through there, cuts that out, no problem. Make short work of it. And then I take the piece and stick it up in the vise and pull down with my crescent wrench, and that just gently rolls it into the shape that you need. And then probably go back and forth a couple of times and fine-tune it with your little air grinder, and then put a chamfer on there for your weld. So that's it for our part 1 segment of our pan. I'll get working on the second part and upload that shortly. So for now, there she is, all nice and clean, ready to finish her up. Well, thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.